Good morning, everyone. It is with great honor that I welcome Ms. Renu Abraham to the two-day National Conference of Science Studies organized by the Research and Postgraduate Department of English, Sankara College, Kalady, in collaboration with Mahatma University under the Sree Management Aid for Research Transformation Scheme of IQAC. Ms. Renu Abraham holds many credentials to her name. She is an assistant professor of English and head of the Department of English and Cultural Studies at the esteemed Christ University, Bannerghatta campus, Bangalore. She initially worked as a journalist and moved to the post of editor with Cambridge University Press India before finding her way into the field of teaching and academics. She has published 2 papers analyzing children's entertainment magazines in general and also analyzed cultural appropriation in the Thinker magazine. She has also published research articles on fan writings based on Hindi television serials. Her teaching encompasses pop and fandom culture in India. Her research entails deep dives into piracy and ethics surrounding stream television contents, digital societies and communities, as well as children's educational literature. Today, she has accepted our invitation to be the keynote speaker of this conference. We all look forward to your talk on the politics of digital platforms and the paradoxes of democracy and the agency that exists within them. Once again, welcome ma'am, and I hope you enjoy your time here.
I now have the honor of inviting our keynote speaker, Dr. Renu Abraham, to address the gathering.
Thank you so much for the warm invite, and good morning everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me for this particular conference, because it's a proud moment for me, and it's a privilege also for me to be part of this particular conference. Largely because fan studies conferences are relatively rare and in between as far as the country is concerned. Tremendous amount of work is being done in fan cultures, fandoms and all of that, but conferences are not very easy to come by as far as fan studies are concerned. The last conference that made hype right within the country was largely pre-COVID between 2018 and 2019 in Bombay, where almost all the who's of, let's say, fandom studies within the country was present, and abroad was also present. Now, in that particular conference, there was a lot of work that was done, a lot of work that was presented on various facets of fan cultures, be it manga, be it anime, be it cinema, be it sports, religious fandoms, spiritual fandoms, celeb fandoms, and it just went on, right, for a huge list, a huge panel, reality television shows, all of those, right? It was a particular conference spanning around 4 days, and it covered almost all of these particular areas. But interestingly, there was one area which was not in the least covered, which was fandoms related to Hindi television serials, or for that matter, any television soap opera within the country broadly, right? So that's been something that I've been grappling with for some time. Right? Why is it that in the arena of fan studies that we have a lot of work that is being done, but a lot of work is also not being done in areas which are very, very important, right, to address, to understand, to engage with. So therefore, when this particular conference invite came by, I just jumped at it, because this is something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time, right, a conference, a conference on fan studies once again. So, and in this particular conference, and I can now talk about something that people don't necessarily talk about broadly. So thank you so much to the organizers. I thank the principal, Dr. Kumar, for the warm welcome today. I thank Dr. Rajesh for the invite and for calling me over for this particular conference. Dr. Manu, Dr. Srija, Dr. Sree, everybody else who sort of been with us from yesterday's, right, largely helping, acclimatizing me to this environment, all of them. Thank you so much. And like I said, right, it's a great privilege to be here. And I hope, right, in this 90 minutes that I have with me, I will be able to do some justice, right, to an area of study that I'm really passionate about. And I do know that some of you are also passionate about fan studies. Some of you do not know much about fan studies, that is also fine. morning, because in the next 2 days, right, you would get to know a lot more about this particular area. So when I first decided on talking about this, there were two aspects that I could talk about largely. So one is broadly, the kind of work that is done in fan scholarship, let's say over the decades. Probably from 1980s onwards, when it sort of first flashed into the academic scene, right, with people like Henry Jenkins and even before that John Fisk and others talking about fandoms and engagements, right, within fan platforms or physical spaces, etc. Right, from that particular point onwards, what you necessarily see, right, within fandom studies, right, within fan scholarship, among ACA fan scholarship as we call it, academic fan scholarship, ACA fan scholarship, right? It's mostly how the work that is done is in and around how fans operate, right, within these particular spaces, right? In terms of ethnographic studies have been conducted, the kind of activities that they do have been examined, what is the nature of those activities, all of that have been examined. Right, but what is not being examined is relatively what we understand to be the platform upon which, let's say, these activities take place. So today my intention is to look at, a relatively budding field, right, within fandom studies. It's budding, right, within the country probably, but it's by and large emergent across the world, right, in terms of platforms, right? What does a platform enable a fan to do? Right? What is the engagement that a fan is limited to or allowed to, right, within a particular platform space? What are the platform affordances of a particular, what are platform affordances? How does that guide, let's say, fan activities, the politics of platforms that enable a specific kind of, let's say, engagement by the fans in that particular on platforms, right? So those are the basic things that I will be looking at broadly. So to give you a good, maybe a popular understanding of what we will be doing with, just quickly for me to understand from the audience, from the students who are here, how many of you are fans of something or the other? One person. Oh come on, it can't be this bad. How many of you are fans of something or the other? Alright, okay, a little bit more. Fans of parents? So fans of your father, mother, no. There's not age of being fans of parents and all. No. Teachers? No? No, that also. Okay, what are you fans of, those of you who are fans of anything? Or what do you understand by this word fan? Anybody? Do you want to send the mic across to anybody who would like to say something? No. You come for a conference, you come to hear, right? Not to speak. Yeah, somebody's nodding her head. Right. Anyway. So I'm not going to go into the terminologies of fans or cultists or any of those kinds of things because that is broadly something that we already engage with in some fashion or the other. We all of us like something or the other, isn't it? Now, what does it make us a fan of that? Maybe yes, we don't know, right? But maybe how many of us like a particular actor and we see almost all the movies of that particular actor? Nobody, one person. Then you're a fan, right? Now, the difference would be in terms of, what does a fan engagement necessarily lead you to, right? Do you then produce something in and around it, or are you simply a person who sort of consumes, right, something that surrounds the person that you like, or any of those kinds of things, right? So those are discussions maybe you can have a little later. You can maybe look up on, what a fan is, how fan cultures are formed, all of that. Interestingly, the initial sessions today morning from Professor Anil Kumar as well as Professor Manu and Professor Rajesh, they have already introduced you to some aspects of a particular fandom, let's say, or a fan in general. And what is necessarily part and parcel of what we understand to be fan studies. So those basics I will not go into. So like I said, I will only be looking at what is a platform. Now, or what is platform studies, how does it impact, let's say, what we understand to be fan scholarship or even fan activities, fan engagements and things like that. So that is the area that I will be looking at, focusing today. I've turned to my presentation, the walled garden. Right. Broadly because, when we're looking at gardens, it's a very metaphoric kind of a title. Right. This is also, and to also maybe, a quick note of let's say, acknowledgement. The PPT, I'm relatively old-fashioned. I'm not good with PPTs. So this was something that my students made for me. Right, I gave them what I wanted, and they sort of, helped me curate this particular PPT. Right, the content is mine, the PPT is theirs. So that's the way in which I also use this PPT, or rather, I thought I would use the PPT largely because I'm quite garrulous when it comes to talking. I can't seem to stop, and I sort of, start somewhere and go somewhere else. So the PPT is more a structuring mechanism. It sort of anchors me to what I should be talking about today, rather than just rambling on right from one point to the other. So you may also please take it in that particular sense. Right. So yeah. So when we talk about this walled garden, this is also the image that came out of discussions that we've had with our students broadly, with my students broadly. So when we look at platforms, right, one of those important things, right, or rather when we're looking at a garden, let's say, right, a garden is different from, let's say, a wild proliferance of, let's say, plants and flowers and things like that. Because as far as we're concerned, a garden is something that is more well tended, more structured, organized, and cared for in that sense, right? So that is the point of a garden. Otherwise, it's not a garden. It can be a, any kind of, other kinds of space largely, right? Where there is autonomy for the plant to grow in whichever fashion it wants to, among weeds, everything. But a garden is a well-tended space, right? There are rules that the gardener sets for the plants. They align, right? And if they are pruned, all kinds of things happen within the particular garden. And this particular garden, the wall is something that protects that particular garden broadly. Now, from predatory hands sometimes, prying eyes sometimes, right? All kinds of things. People think it is they know what is best for the garden, etc., etc. Right? So a lot of those kinds of things. So that's the kind of metaphor that we're looking at when we're looking at, let's say, a platform and its affordances broadly. The title is, or the talk is broadly about, what is the kind of democracy or agency, right, that platforms allow fans to engage with, right? How much does the platform limit or allow the fan to engage with broadly, right? That is something that we will be looking at. So we're looking at both democracy and agency on one side, but at the same time, what control enables or disables, right, within fandom spaces. Now, as far as this is the roadmap of the presentation today, I will be broadly looking at a quick introduction to digital fan platforms, and I'll also introduce you to very bare basics of, let's say, what platform studies is. I will be looking at a particular, in order to give you an understanding of a platform and how a platform operates. I will be looking at a platform called India Forums. I'll introduce you to India Forums a little later. Then I will also look at the community building that happens within that particular platform called India Forums. I'll also look at, let's say, democracy and agency as it happens within the forums, and also the control that is effected within the forum. So through this example or through this case study, we will try and understand, right, how a digital platform operates, a digital fan platform operates, right? And ultimately, we'll try and see if there is a midway that we can reach, or we can understand, right, this idea of democracy as it is, right, within these platforms. Because one of the major things that we operate with, or what we talk about, right, when we discuss fans, right, and fandoms, is the fact that it allows a lot of agency for the fan, right? But is this agency, a complete, uncontrolled agency? Right? Does a fan necessarily have full control, full autonomy? So those are the questions that we will be looking at. And the other kind of a question alongside it is that, should a fan require full autonomy? What happens is, what happens if the fan can, let's say, produce anything and everything the fan wants to produce and put it into the public domain largely? And those are some of those questions that we will be dealing with, that we will look at broadly. Now, as far as fandom is concerned, right? I don't have to broadly discuss with you what a fan platform is, or what a digital fandom is, because I think all of us who are fans in some fashion or the other operate on digital platforms or digital fan communities, right? Now, but just to sort of to define the particular category of a digital fandom, they're communities that connect fans across the globe, creating vibrant ecosystems of passion and creativity. Now, when we're looking at, let's say, a fandom, an online platform, a digital platform largely, one of the basic aspects of a digital platform is its transnationality, right? In the sense that it enables, right, us to cross boundaries, right? National boundaries, geographic boundaries, etc., etc. Right? And it also sort of fosters, right, a certain kind of a diasporic, community spirit and things like that. So that's very, so digital platforms in that sense of the word are very enabling kind of platforms, right? So because it enables us to connect with people from across the globe. Now that was something that was absent in the earlier fan communities which were more rooted, right, to the physical locals that they were part of. Right? But today, fan communities, because they've gone on to digital spaces in most of the cases, right, it has a more wider reach, right? It can reach out to publics, right, outside of the geographical location, right, of maybe the fostering of the fandom and things like that. Right, so that's one important aspect of the digital fandoms that we are part of these days. Now, another important part of the digital fandom platform is the immediate interactivity that is available on those particular spaces. Right, because I'm not very sure about this, but how many of your Instagram followers of maybe Mohanlal, Mammootty or something like that, or any of the other celebs or idols or anything? Nobody of you, none of you follow. Okay, there are a few hands here. There, right. So in those platforms, what largely happens is that Mola makes a post or Mammootty makes a post, and each of you has a particular agency to comment on the particular post. And in our particular process of commenting, we are hoped that he might see it, he might reply to it, all of those kinds of things, which rarely or never happens. But interestingly, Anand Mahindra fans are always, quite at the, at the better end of most of these things because he generally has this tendency to reply, right, to the messages that you post, particularly if it has something to really say, right, not just simply responding to his messages or anything, but if he has something to say, he will reply to you, right? So what I need to say is that, these platforms today, right, digital platforms enable, right, quick interactivity. The kind of immediacy and the kind of presence, right, co-presence, right, that was not available to you in the earlier instances or digital fandoms, is available to you now with digital platforms and digital fandoms largely. Right, and that also sort of, that is one part of the interactivity of it. The other part of the interactivity of it is that, if you make a post of fan writing or fan fiction on it, there will be n number of people, right, followers or people who read those fan fiction who will comment on that fan fiction. They might interpret it, they might give you some comments on it, likes on it, all of that, right? So in that particular process, again, right, it becomes an interactive kind of a space. So it is not available to you for any kind of physical writing that you did, right? How many of you wrote? I don't think there were letters to the right, authors that you might do and all those kinds of things. But today, those kinds of things have changed, right? There are better ways in sort of, contacting these authors or, letting them know that you like their writing and things like that. That always exists. But fan fiction platform, what happens is that you can respond to their specific fan fiction. You can sort of give comments. You can sort of interpret it. You can suggest. You can create your own video mixes based on the particular fan fiction. All kinds of things, right? So that kind of interactivity, that kind of an extension, right, is possible. We will look at that activity also a little later, right, in terms of a collaborative co-production kind of an idea. Right. Another important aspect of the digital fandoms, like any other physical fandoms, but a lot more immediate, is the fact that it enables strong community building among fans. Right? You can interact, connect with like-minded people, people who have the same kinds of tastes and likings and aspects, right? Within your particular fan community. So it enables, right, bonding, a certain kind of community building that happens within those platforms largely. So I also know a lot of people who met through fan platforms and become great friends and then physically met and all those kinds of things, right? So that's also possible as a result of, that's also something that these platforms enable you to, right? A certain kind of, collective community building that happens in these aspects. Now, earlier we look at it, the fan communities, the physical fan communities, particularly speaking, right? They were physical communities, right? You would maybe call each other, write letters, and then you would decide a particular time and space to meet, and then you would come and meet together. I do know there are a lot of these physical Mammootty fan clubs Rajinikanth fan clubs, Mohanlal fan clubs, and a lot of the fan clubs and all that operate, right, as physical spaces also. But these days, more it has become a lot more easier, right, to make turn these particular spaces into digital spaces largely. And this enables a lot more connectivity among fans, right? You don't have to go through the old rigmarole of, trying to follow people and, organize a certain function or other certain event and, all of those, right? So that is now made available through these digital platforms. Now, technological advances have made them possible for you, and today fan communities have become a lot more organized, right, in terms of their activities, in terms of how they conduct themselves, rules, regulations, all kinds of things, right? So at a particular point, anything would go, but today, there is a lot more restrictions that are placed on activities, engagements within fan platforms. So that's something that we will be looking at, right, towards this session. Now, as far as these platforms are concerned, right, these are very important, these digital platforms or fan activities are very important platforms, right? Because they enable fan expression and creativity, they enable community bonding among fans and also influence media production. Now, when I say they influence media production, fans have a lot of power, literally speaking, right? They have power in the sense that they can sort of, make and break a movie, a soap, all of those kinds of things, right? So they can come together on various kinds of aspects, right, related to that particular movie and make noise about it, right, positive noise or let's say critical noise about it, and action is taken, right, based on those kinds of engagements, and that kind of action-oriented, response-oriented shifts, right, have happened particularly with the emergence of digital patterns. Earlier there was noises made, critical voices raised, all of those kinds of things, but action taken was relatively less. Right? But today, that has changed, that has moved, that has improved quite a bit. So in that sense of the word, fans have developed a lot more agency in sort of voicing their opinions and getting what they want, right, out of the producers, out of the creative industries, the culture industries that otherwise, right, made us passive consumers, made fans passive consumers. Now, at this particular stage, before I progress, I would also like to sort of quickly sort of state my positionality, right? I am for family studies. I'm also for the idea of a fan, right? Though I'm more like a passive fan in the sense that I don't necessarily actively engage in writing fan fiction or producing fan content or anything. I'm quite positive about the affordances, right? That this activity, fan activities have, right, within the larger societies and all that, provided, right, it is they are sustainable in terms of legal, right, in terms of building communities, right, in terms of critiquing all of those kinds of things. Because like a lot of us, right, are familiar with these debates, right, fans are not necessarily known always or are positively perceived in a lot of contexts. Right, they are perceived as a stigmatized community, right, in the sense that they're known for frenzy, they're known for mob engagements, right, all kinds of excesses in that sense, right. So at that particular stage, right, I'm not for the excesses of fans, but some excesses are also good, largely because it can lead to creative expressions, right, sublimated creative expressions, things like that. And it also sort of enables, right, community building in very specific kinds of ways. It can be detrimental in a lot of instances, but a lot of fan activity which is negative, right, is what comes to the fore in the media. For example, I'm sure a lot of, I'm not you're younger than me, right, so obviously, maybe you don't know, maybe you heard. When Aishwarya Rai and Amitabh Bachchan got married at the particular time, I don't know whether you remember this particular incident of this girl claiming she was Abhishek Bachchan's wife and, attempting, cutting her wrists and all that. It was not necessarily a suicidal attempt, it was just called for attention. So those kinds of things, right? So fans are known for those kinds of engagements, excesses also, right? You also have, Michael Jackson fans, right? When his, where aspects or other, notions of his pedophilic engagements were made public, right? There were a lot of fan rights that happened, where most of them claimed that, he's not that way. Even at, in the face of, overwhelming evidence. Right, so a lot of those kinds of things happen, and I'm sure recently you've seen some of those activities also around name any particular incident or any of those kinds of things, but we're all familiar with what's happening in and around us. right? So things like that. So it's something that we've been. So fans is not fandom or a fan is not necessarily always a positive word, but it has a lot of positive engagement. It has a lot of positive vibes, maybe, right? And it has a lot of positive energy that is channelized in the right kind of way. And that may be something that we should. A lot of fan activities have been looking, and scholarship has been looking at also, right? Now, broadly, when we're talking about fun activities, the three broad categories of fun activities that most of us today on digital fandoms are familiar with are, let's say, fan fiction. Right, most of us know are familiar with fan fiction. Some of us write fan fiction. How many of you write fan fiction? Anybody here? Okay, one person, two people. Okay, four, five, six. Right, so that. So yeah, so a lot of us do write fan fiction. Right, there are video mixes that anybody who's good with editing, creative video mixes of your favorite actors coming together, things like that. Right, so that's also another interesting fun activity that happens on spaces and all of that, where particularly with respect to, it can happen with respect to, let's say, fictional work, as in literary fictional work, but also, let's say, other kinds of, videos and like films or soaps and things like that also. Right, so you cut and you edit out sequences, right? You mix them together with other sequences, and you play a Bollywood song or Hollywood song, something along or a regional song with it, and sort of create your own mix, right? With your favorite couple, right? All of those film couples, I mean, all of that, right? So that's what you understand to be video mixes and things like that. You also have real person fiction. Now, this is a very problematic area. It's a relatively gray area. When we talk about real person fiction, we are talking about the fiction that is written with real life personalities. So I like, let's say, maybe some actor. So I sort of create a story with that actor, with me being one of those characters, or somebody else, right? In the real person with those particular characters, etc., etc. Right? And the story moves on, right? So it's not wish fulfillment. It is a certain kind of the way in which it functions largely, right? So that is there. But a lot of people look down upon this particular genre, but at the same time, a lot of people find it very enabling also. Right? There are two sides to the particular thing. There are implications for it, that's why I specifically mentioned your participation. Then obviously there is other kind of fan work, right? Like CDs, making CDs, right? Fan art, all of those kinds of things that emerge broadly. Right. So all of these, form part and parcel of fan activities and fan engagements within digital spaces broadly. Now, fan fiction was always part and parcel of, let's say, fan activities, right? From time immemorial, Star Wars, Star Trek, and all of them, right? They created fan signs. Fans created fan signs with, their own interpretations of, Star Wars and Star Trek and all of that, right? They circulated among, physical forms in their communities and all those kinds of things. So that's been something that's already actively there, right? And generally, when we talk about fan fiction or any kind of transformative work, right? The idea is that most of them consider it to be, a lot of people consider it to be, right? Even among fan scholars, they consider it to be parasitic because they're always dependent on another literary work or film or any of those kinds of things. So therefore, just parasitic in that sense of the word. But sometimes these so-called parasitic kind of forms can also become forms of their own. So one of those particular examples would be Twilight and what emerged post-Twilight, right? The series that we get in that. Let's the 50 Shades of Grey, right? That particular series, right? That emerged as a fan fiction, but it sort of, transitioned into something that could stay standalone for itself. Now the idea of fan writing, right, or fan fiction, or even for that matter, video mixes and all that, are not, they are their status is ambiguous, and quite a lot of these actors, producers, all of them are ambivalent towards it. So some authors are very clearly against it, like J.K. Rowling. She even took people to court, right? So people wrote fan fiction, and there are other kinds of aspects around it also. People like Andrews and others are also quite negative about fan fiction in general. They don't support that particular idea. They feel that their work is desecrated, all of that, right? Through fan engagement and all that. But whereas another section of society, writers, producers, actors, right, believe that it is an important activity. It also gives a certain kind of momentum to their own work also. Right. Sometimes, I know a lot of people come to watch television serials after they've seen a video mix, and then they're interested, excited about it, and then you come and watch, that particular soap and things like that, right? So that's also the way in which, this particular aspect functions. So it has, both its pros and its cons largely. It depends on, which side of the picture you are in. Right? I'm on this side of the picture where I believe that it's good work. Right? It has its problems, yes, not deny, can't deny some of them. But it is important that you leverage, right, a certain amount of agency, a certain amount of voices, right, within these particular platforms. Now, the important aspect of this is that as far as fan engagement is concerned, right, and particularly on digital platforms, the idea is that it promises a lot of democratic freedom. But the problem is also that this freedom comes right with complex systems of control, and that is where the paradox lies also as far as digital platforms are concerned. Right. So one of those particular fundamental questions, right, that we talk about, right, when we talk about platforms, right, and what a platform enables is that, if pan-activity, right, is something that enables autonomy control, right, for the fan, right, should the platform control that autonomy? Should the platform, let's say, place rules and regulations and things like that, that controls, what a fan can say, engage with, produce, right, on those particular platforms, right? And if at all it is, they do it, right, what is the kind of agency that that platform then enables for the fan, right? So that was the fundamental question that we're looking at here, right? How can genuine agency or user agency flourish, right, within a controlled environment? Now, a quick question to all of you. We've not been answering particularly, but I just see hands raised from all of the times, so at least that much really. Right. So how many of you feel that fan platforms or any of the platforms that we engage with, right, like Instagram or Facebook or any of the other social media sites that we engage with, should be controlled? Okay, one person thinks it should be controlled, another, yeah, two people feel yeah, there, another hand. Okay, how many of you feel that it should be given, it should be unfettered, no control should exist within those spaces? That also not be the case. Yeah. Maybe you should start believing something or the other, okay? Right. But anyways. Right. So in order for us to understand, right, how this particular notion of freedom and control operates, I will be looking at a particular platform called India Forums. Right. As far as India Forums is concerned, I have a visible link there. Is it possible for you to click that link and then project it to the audience? Is this somebody who is proficient with the system here? Alright. Okay, I'll try and explain this to you, though it's not a very easily explainable type of platform. Now, India Forums is a digital platform. It's a fan platform, probably. There's a clickable link under that. So it's something you just click on it and then move to the page. Talking that out. India Forums is broadly, like I told you, it is a digital fan platform. Right? And it is a gigantic platform, if I may use the word. I largely say gigantic largely because, it is a particular platform that hosts, right, television serial fandoms for all television, Hindi television channels broadly. Okay. So generally what happens within this particular platform is that Alright, yeah. Right, so it is a digital platform, and this platform hosts, right, television serial fandoms of all television shows, right, within the Hindi television sector. Like the Star, yeah, so be it, Star Plus or the Colors Page, and TV, any of those sectors. So what I can show you is this particular page or Star Plus. When you go, can you scroll down? Yeah. Scroll down. Right. So you look at this, right? Each of these platforms have categories for on and off and outside. Now, scroll down. Now these are all the television serials that is running on Star Plus right now. You will know each of them will be review each of them, you will move to that particular fan forum. And in that particular fan forum, you will find, let's say, fan fiction, journalists, all of that, right? All kinds of fan activities related to that particular television fandom. Now, just imagine this particular site has been operational from 2003, right? So it hosts all television, Hindi television serial fandoms, right? Produced from 2003 onwards till today. That's not 25 years or 22 years worth of television streaming is there broadly, right? So it has all the fan fiction or other fan forums for all of these particular serials. Now, some of you might be familiar with spaces like Archive of Our Own, right, and such like that. But what you don't find there is this kind of organizational structure, right, where there is dedicated panels for each and every show, right, that you are curating broadly, right? And it is gigantic. Literally, even one of them, each photo will have close to 6,000 pages. Each page will have at least, let's say, around 25 to 30 entries. Each of those entries will have another 100 pages, right? And within those 100 pages, each entry will again have another 100 pages. So that's a way in which it operates. So it's quite hyper, like quite gigantic in its own organization. And I just wanted to sort of give you a quick overview of that particular forum. Not a lot of people are familiar with it, but at the same time, right, it has a huge impact, right, within people who watch television serials in India largely. Right. It's a digital metropolis in that sense. And that is what I just want you to understand that particular aspect of it. Right? It's a huge space, right? It is a digital metropolis in that sense of the word, right? It has, like we've already talked about, right? It sort of features television shows, movies, digital OTT, series. It has a section on celebrities. It has a section on let's say Hollywood. It has sections on let's say Korean drama, all kinds of things, right? But its predominant engagement is with Hindi television serials broadly. Um, Now the scale is such, right, and the data that's available on the website is also as dated as 2021, but it can only have increased at this particular stage and not come down because of the operational dynamics of this particular portal. Now this is the statistics of the particular portal, right? The statistics is from 2021, that is the most recent statistics that's available on the particular platform. So there's around 1.2 million registered users, right? That is excluding, let's say, people who just visit the forum for various activities or the others without having registered on the particular forum. So in that instance, it has 54.5 million plus monthly page views, and 4.4 million monthly unique visits also. That is, the impact that the forum has, right, on the community. And obviously, this kind of statistics helps in advertising revenue. Right, so that's also important to understand, right? Because it is this platform that enables fan activity. Right. So now to quickly look at this particular photo, it was founded in 2003 by Gandhi. He is the owner of the particular platform, and it is owned under the aegis of a corporate entity called CyberX Communications, CyberX Media Private Limited. And it was first initiated in 2003. When he first began this, he began it as a small blog, right, on Blogspot, which was dealing with, let's say, and he started writing commentaries, right, and summaries of Jesse J.C. Koineni. I'm not very sure if any of you are familiar with that in the television serial. The serial, it is as old as 2002, 2003, right? That's the time when this was on. And it was one of those most successful television serials in the industry, in the country for that matter, because it had a relatively different, storyline, right? Because unlike the Sasbahu serials that were running at that particular point, right, this particular serial was talking about a secretary and a boss's relationship broadly, right? And to put it very crudely, maybe. Right, so in which way? So that was, something that sort of appealed to the young crowd, to the young crowd, all of those, and it became a huge success, right? And here was this bespectacled secretary, not so very good looking, and all of those kinds of things, right? Entry into this, into the secretarial job with a very, risky and not so very pleasant boss. Handsome, obviously, like all, narratives of this matter, this matter sort of, will be. Right, so things like that. So he started writing on that particular series because it seemed to him that it has clicked, right? It sort of sparked the imagination of a huge populace at that particular time. And interestingly, he also had a computer sciences background, right? He was a programmer and he was trained in programming, probably coding and programming. Now, as a result of it, he started the Interforums platform, right, from his experiences as a computer scientist, right, and as a programmer at Google with that set, right. So it is self-described today as the number one entertainment discussion forum and a youth networking site. And it broadly focuses on Hindi television serials, right, or soaps broadly, right, in addition to the others which have evolved over a period of time, like Korean drama, right, Bollywood, Hollywood, all of those kinds of things. But it's tremendous engagement and fan base that emerges, from television serials broadly. It had a rapid growth between 2006 and 2007. It was ranked at the top 1,500 websites, among the top 1,500 websites in the country. And it became a key hub for fans before the dominance of platforms like Facebook and all that. In fact, Facebook came on the over post 2008 and things like that, right? So then you had Orkut and these things like that. But slowly, right? Before it became Facebook became popular, it had become hugely popular broadly. It is now this influence of this platform is such that even actors like Smriti Irani and others, right, during her QT Sasbahu days, right, used to visit this particular platform to get real-time feedback from fans in terms of how she acted or what how the characterization was going, whether the fans were liking the way in which things were going within the particular series and all of those kinds of things, right? So just like that, actors, producers, writers, right, all of them visit this particular site in order to gauge, right, the powers of the audience broadly. And because this is a tremendously interesting site which collates, right, a huge amount of information surrounding Hindi television series. Quite generally across a lot of other fan work that I've looked at, I've not seen a platform like this. Right, you have a lot of digital platforms, right, which engage with specific, series, soaps, all of those kinds of things, right? But this kind of a platform is, something that you don't necessarily see otherwise. So well organized, so well curated in that sense of the word, and very comprehensive. So in that sense, right, it is one of those magnificent popular culture artifacts, right? It has something or the other for everybody, literally speaking, right? And it takes you in as a consumer of that particular this thing, right? So that is something that you see very clearly in this particular instance, right? So and Bannerghatta is the founder of this particular forum, right? Is also somebody who sort of cashed in on the absence of structured let's say content delivered on Hindi television series and things like that, right? So he said that TV was not a medium that was covered by mainstream media. There was no portal for television shows. So what he did, right, over a period of time was to curate a set of television journalists, right, who then would go to visit these sites and all those kinds of things, collect data from there, do quick behind the scenes videos and things like that of the actors and actresses, right, their activities behind the scenes and all of that, and all of these would also be put up in these particular platforms, right? So and all of that sort of literally sort of boosted, right, the fan engagement, the fan base of this particular platform. Now, in terms of the distribution of this platform, it covers all the major countries like Canada, USA, UK, and India, from where the predominant user base is. But at the same time, it covers 36 countries in general. It includes Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Philippines, Russia, like Germany, Poland, Norway. It goes on, right? So this particular platform has fans, right, and users, right, from each of these particular countries. Now there are foreigners, but there are also diasporic Indians and dominantly diasporic Indians. Right, in Bangladesh and Pakistan, obviously it is Pakistanis and Bangladeshis also engage with it. But at the same time, it also in other countries, you will also have a dominantly diasporic population who engages with this particular group. The gender distribution is that close to 60% of the users on this particular platform are women. Around 40% of it is largely, most of them identify as male and female, that is the importance here. And it also has a social media footprint broadly. Now, if you look at the structure, architecture of this particular community, right, like I showed you right, in the initial stages, right, when we were looking at the business side, there are three categorizations there. There are three categorizations there. So, go to Starbucks or to CTV and Colors, you will see the first section, the first grid, where it tells you that all the series that are on air. Right? If you click on that particular button, you will be able to access the fan platforms for all the series that are running at that particular time. Now, if you click on off air, it is all the series that have now come to a conclusion, but the fan community is still active in that. Right? So it is off air, but it is still active. The archived communities are serials that are already over, but at the same time, not much of fan engagement or no fan engagement happens there anymore. So that is those photos are archived. So you can right? You cannot do anything in the archived photos. But in the off-air and on-air photos, you can necessarily sort of engage with activities, create your fan content, post, comment, do all of those, create polls, maybe all of those. Right? So there is a lot of that activity that is going on in those instances. Now, the important aspect here is all of these forums are open to everybody. Right? Anybody who enters into this India forums, whether you are a registered member or not, can access most of these posts. Right? So in that sense of the word, it is open access. But at the same time, there is also a certain restricted access available, largely where if I'm creating a fan content, fan writing, visuals, or any of those kinds of things, I feel that this is meant, this may be R-rated or X-rated, and I want only members of that particular community to view it because I fear for my safety, maybe, or the kind of comments that come up or cyberbullying or any of those kinds of things. I can restrict the viewership to only members. Right? So there is that particular kind of a protocol, algorithmic protocol available to you. Right? In the other instances, there are also private forums within these user member communities where you can join only on request or through an invite broadly. So that is one more layer of protection that is added to your content broadly. So these are so there is open content, there is restricted content, and there is members only or other, let's say, invite only content also available within these particular platforms. Right. So that's a way in which the dynamics works there. The next thing that we will look at is the community dynamics on India forums. Now, as far as the users are concerned, in this particular platform, right? The users inhabit three distinct modes of participation. So you have users, that is anybody who enters into that particular forum to access any of the content in that particular forum at any point. And they are the users broadly. You also have at least this is the way I classify them. You also have user members, right? You are a registered participant in that particular community. But at the same time, one does not necessarily actively participate in that particular community to post or to like or any of those kinds of things, but you access the content there and you consume the content in most probability as a passive consumer or otherwise, right? And this particular segment of people, right, user members who are registered participants in the community but do not actively participate in activities within the community, is quite looked down upon by the other community members, right? And they're called lurkers. They're constantly castigated, right? You called, they berate you if you don't like posts, right, or not make comments or things like that. And their logic is that we put in so much effort to create something for you, and you've taken pleasure in reading it. The least you can do is give a like. Right, but then a lot of these lurkers, right, user members, right, people like me probably, right, don't necessarily, do any of those things, right, we don't like, we don't comment, right, on other people's activities, right, but then it's something that is encouraged within that particular community because it allows, a certain kind of community building, a community bonding, right, all of that, and also a certain amount of self, appreciation that you can have for other people's creativity, work, and all of that. Because if you're part of these communities, in most instances, you would be part, other than in the cases of anti-fandom that like we were talking about, right? It's mostly because you like those stories, you like the fandom, or you like the television show and things like that. So in those instances, and you're already part of this particular community, what is the big deal in saying that you like it, right? Or any of those kinds of things, right? That's the logic with which they work. The third category of people are obviously the prosumers, the active producers and consumers of, let's say, meaning there, right? Which are termed member participants because they are members, registered members, but they actively participate in the in the forum, right? In terms of writing fan fiction, commenting on other people's posts, right? Creating fan videos, maybe liking, responding, interpreting, creating posts, all kinds of things, right? So they are active participants within the particular forum. So we call them member participants, and these are also, right? I mean, in the parlance of let's say fan scholarship, we call them prosumers also, right? Producers and consumers of meaning, probably. They produce meaning, they consume meaning also. And that is, a large part of fan activities, right? And if we didn't have member participants or other prosumers, then there would be no fan activity at all, right? That something must be there to write the fan fiction, right? The transformative work, right? Things like that. So it's that important. Now, in terms of the blueprint of this particular community, now this community, right, is divided into two distinct classes, right? You have ladder groups and non-ladder groups. And this particular kind of class division, right, is based on the kind of activities that you take, that you do, right, on that particular forum. Now, as far as the social ladder is concerned, the first segment, which is the ladder group, is concerned, everybody who enters, right, who becomes a registered member of the particular community, right, will enter into the beginner ladder, right? So after you have around 100 posts, you will move to the second ladder. So there are around 15 ladders that the members will have to climb depending on the number of posts that you make. Right? So it is a very meritocratic kind of system largely. So based on the kind of let's say posts that you make, the amount of content that you produce in that particular forum, the comments that you do, right, the likes that you give and all of that, you will progress in the hierarchy of that particular ladder. From a beginner till you reach the 15th ladder, which is that of the titan. But to reach the titan ladder, you will have to sort of have around 300,000, right? Posts. And that is an almost impossible kind of a thing. Even the owner has not reached that particular level, right? But that is the aspirational level, right, of let's say climbing the ladder, the hierarchical ladder of the particular platform. Now, when you are a beginner, right, and this is also where certain kind of control begins, right, with the platform. If you are a beginner to the particular platform, you are limited to only 11 posts per day, right? You cannot embed hyperlinks or images, right, in any of the posts that you're making or any of those kinds of things. And you can only send 5 private messages to people in that particular forum every 24 hours, right? And you would also have to enter into the particular forum or post it only by going to a capture, regulation, right, moderation largely. Now, why they do this is probably, the owner, Vijay Bhatta, the moderators tell us, it's because, to access the seriousness of a person who's engaged in that particular forum, right? So, you can only do that much because only if you fulfill all the particular criteria will they believe that you are invested in that particular program. You're invested in activities in that particular program and you're serious and not simply there for some random purpose or any of those kinds of things, right? So that that gives you access, those kinds of engagements give you access to other kind of content, right? Other kinds of non-restricted engagements within the particular program. In a different way, you have to first prove your loyalty before the entire system is opened up for you kind of a thing, right? So it's slightly restricted in that particular way, but it is also according to the organizers or rather the owner of the particular platform, a restriction that is put in place to safeguard the safety of other members of that particular community. Right, so as an anti-fan member, right, if I enter into this particular platform and say whatever I want to say, all of those kinds of things, that becomes problematic. Right, so they try to sort of purge, sanitize, right, that particular forum through activities and algorithmic controls like this. Right, it is set in that particular kind of fashion. So it's only after you finish 100 posts, right, that a new level is open to you, a new ladder is open to you, and restrictions are slowly taken away. Right, so that's the way in which this operates. This is the way in which the ladder of business or operational. Right. So this is also I think I've already spoken about broadly. Right. So there are three broad levels. You have the beginner level, you have the achiever level, that is if you are achieving your niche, let's say 500,000 posts largely. And then you have post achiever, you have the elite group. So you have three broad classifications among these 15 levels. 15 levels comes also. Right, you have the beginners, you have the achievers, and then you have the elites. Right, each of them sort of, so in a different kind of way, there's obviously the gamification, right, of that particular code of your engagements, your activities on that particular kind of code. You do this much, you will move to another ladder. You do a little bit more, you reach another kind of level. Right, and that's the way in which all kinds of different things work also. So that incentivizes participation, right, from people in that particular code. So in that sense of the word, it sort of opens up, possibilities and all of that. But at the same time, right, if you have to move, then you have to do certain kinds of things. Right, so that was also something that was there. Then within this particular platform, you also have badges, right, contribution badges that are needed for certain kinds of achievements that you make. So for example, if you every anniversary you get an anniversary badge, that is my anniversary badge is 17 years. I've been on this particular forum. And if you start topics with which have a high participation, you give the badge of an engager. If your post garners more than 500 likes, you get the badge of a facilitator. Whether you have that kind of charisma, right? You draw the audience with your work, right? And if you commented on more than if your post has garnered more than 100 plus comments, you will right. If you post 100 plus comments, then you get the badge of a commentator, and there are plenty of other badges also. And in the other instances, there are also monthly badges, right? So the most posts done in a month, right? Most comments made by a person in a month, right? And also most liked post of the month, etc., etc. So those kinds of badges are also largely there. So which recognizes users' contributions, and a lot of user participants in that particular platform are very positive about this particular kind of gamification broadly. It incentivizes and recognizes their contributions. But at the same time, there is a flip side to this also, which is also something that we're discussing when it comes to platforms. And I'm sure as you're listening to it also, you also understand the flip side of the system also, right? Because it, it will incentivize only what the system recognizes as an achievement. So for an achievement, you have to do what the system wants you to do, right? So you have to do this many posts, you have to do, all of those kinds of things. So there is a control that comes, with these processes of gamification also. Right? The second, the second aspect of it, right, the structure, the second class, right, that is in this platform, right, is the non-lateral groups, right, that we saw in the initial stages, right. The non-lateral groups, right, are the custodians of that particular community, right. Now these non-lateral group members are also members of the lateral groups, right, but you should be in India, you should at least be an achiever, right, or somewhere along those lines in order for you to become part of the development team, right, the custodian structure. Now the development team has an interesting structure with the administrator and the center enable channel moderation. So they have certain privileges, right, which come from their understanding in the particular platform, from their activities in the particular platform, etc., where you are hand-chosen by the administrator, by the owner of the particular platform, to become a moderator, right, in some fashion or the other. So again, what is incentivized is, your behavior on that particular platform, your activities and the manner in which you behave in a particular platform is what enables you to move into the development team, as they call it, the moderating team, the custodian group largely. Right, that is the non-liable group. Now, this is, the unseen government that operates, behind this particular platform. Right, this is the development team. Right, this development team is largely comprised of techno volunteers. These are, volunteers, right, fan volunteers broadly, who take up this particular activity out of their passion and their, their investment in that particular platform. So they are so invested into, the fan activities, fan engagements and all of that. They spend a tremendous amount of time moderating this platform. Right, taking part in activities, creating activities, looking at posts, right, deleting posts, giving warnings, all kinds of things is what, the moderators do. So like I mentioned earlier, the administrator is the founder, Vijay Bhatta. Then you have global moderators. They have moderating rights across the entire platform. Right? They are also called GMs or VEs. You have channel moderators who moderate channels. Right? For example, Startup channel will have a moderator who will moderate all the show forums on that particular show, season forums on that particular channel. Right? And within that particular channel, you will also have other moderators to assist the channel moderators, and you will have beauties who will take care of independent forums broadly, of very specific kinds of television series, etc., etc. And you have coolbies and newbies also who are, who are lower than the newbies largely. They might not have many moderating rights, but they have some control broadly. Now, what these the development team members have, right, is a certain amount of power in their hands. That they can edit posts, they can delete posts, that they can lock posts so that no others can see it, right? They can crash posts and also issue warnings to users and also enforce platform rules. So these are some of the privileges that I accorded to the moderators. Now this is a very interesting kind of mechanism that operates within these forums, and it's also important to recognize, right, the tremendous amount of fan engagement that this particular team is involved in. Right? It's because it's purely volunteer work that they're doing, but on average, right? And some of them are working members, some of them are students, all kinds of engagements that they're part of. Right? In addition to it, they spend at least 4 hours a day on this particular forum, looking at posts, seeing that nothing untoward is posted there, deleting posts that require deletion, all of those kinds of things. Now, obviously, it's subjective. There are problems there, obviously. Right, but this is the amount of work and investment that each of them have. So if you look at this particular community, right, you can see that it operates in terms of what Ferdinand Talley calls a community and society. So when we're talking about a community broadly, we talk about close-knit systems, right, which are not which are kinship-based, value system-based, shared. There are communities that come together of people with shared values, kinship, sometimes mutual support, and all of those kinds of things. Whereas Gesellschaft, which is that of a society, is largely controlled by rules, regulations, all of those kinds of things. Right? It is mechanical, it is artificial, and it's more public, and the relationships are transactional. Right? And that's what a Gesellschaft is. Now, generally speaking, right, all social systems are divided into, as far as studies is concerned, right, societies and communities. And in a lot of instances, these might not necessarily merge together, but India Forums operates in a very, very interesting kind of a manner. It is a Gesellschaft, which is that of a society, with multiple Gesellschafts operating within it. Now, when we're talking about, let's say, a Gesellschaft, the platform has overarching, let's say, rules and regulations, right? It has a code of conduct, forum rules, all of those kinds of things, which enable, right, a structured behavior by members within a particular community. So that makes it operate as if it is a Gesellschaft, that is a community, a society, sorry. Right, but at the same time, there is also community building that happens there in the very specific forums. For example, if I'm a member of, let's say, a Kyunki Sasbi Bahuti forum, let's say, I develop, let's say, close bands, right, bonds, right, with people who, right, like the same kind of a serial, who also are, are vested in that particular television serial. I share, maybe my anecdotes, fiction, work, all of it with them, and we build a close-knit kind of an engagement, right, with fellow, with members who invest in the same kind of engagement. So in that sense, right, so Indiaforums operates, right, like an overarching society with multiple domain chats, right, which are very specific kinds of fan forums that operate within that particular society, right. So is this clear to you in terms of what we're trying to say? Right, a larger society with multiple communities operating within it, right. So that's the way in which, let's say, Indiaforums largely functions as far as I can see it operational. Now, when we're talking about a general shaft, that is a society broadly, there are certain kinds of things that operate in order to make India forums a general shaft, right? That is a society. Now, there is stratified hierarchy within the forum because there is a rigid ladder system, right? That you have to climb from one point to the other. Then it is also, let's say, moderated through formal contracts, right? The standard formal contracts like terms of use, privacy policies, forum rules, all of those kinds of things, which are legally valid actually speaking. Right? So that forms again, right, one of those aspects that make the particular platform for society. Right? In addition to it, it's also commercial enterprise. Remember that in the first instance I showed you the user base for that particular platform. Right? 12.4 million users is what the platform holds of, right? On a 60 to 40 ratio of male and female. Right? So this is a very ideal, let's say, uh, platform for advertising. All right. So a lot of advertisers, right? So for this particular forum, there is no membership fee to register as part of it. The entire revenue is generated through, for running the particular platform is generated through advertisements. But at the same time, these advertisements, which is also very clear about, is the fact that he will not no porn is permitted, no rummy and those kinds of things are permitted. Only what is acceptable within a television forum is what is permitted within this particular forum in terms of advertisement. But a huge amount of revenue is generated as a result of that advertisement and that, from the advertising revenue. That's what enables the platform to function. So when advertising revenue is what makes a particular platform to continue, obviously there are restrictions that will enter into the picture. There will have to be a certain amount of pleasing that has to be done, industry alignment that has to be done, corporate interest alignment that they have to be done. So that is also part and parcel of this particular platform that exists broadly. Then all the activities on the particular platform is transactional. Remember, when I talked to you in the initial stages, right, of member participants, I told you that the member participants who write their fan fiction and all of that are not simply they're writing it for pleasure, yes, but at the same time they're also writing it for recognition. So they want people to like it, they want comments and all of that. Yesterday, I think we were having this conversation with, Dr. Rajesh and Dr. Sree, and we were looking at, and Dr. Manu, and we were looking at, how Instagram posts are like these days, right? You don't, I mean, these days, when you go to a particular place, right, you're more bothered about taking those pictures to put it on Instagram and other places rather than actually, engaging with that particular space in itself, right? And you're living literally for those, maybe likes and likes that you get, or comments that you get, right, after you post. And that's what you expect when you do an Instagram post. So this thing is transactional, right? I write a story, I expect you to respond to it, I expect you to, give likes, I expect you to write comments on it, etc. Now that is the social currency that operates within that particular program, right, within that particular platform. Now, in terms of how it operates as a virtual domain shaft, that is a community, there is always a feeling of shared deep feeling, right, that is generated as part of those specific forums that you become part of. A lot of members, within the particular forum refer to themselves as family and all of that. That you are a media forums community, you are an ISPN, right? You are a IKPP, GN, all of those kinds of things, right? So there is this shared community feeling, right? This deep feeling that is generated within that. There are certain kinds of ritual activities that are part and parcel of those forums, like climbing the ladder, getting those achievements, all of those kinds of things. There is a lot of mutual support, right, that is given to each other. In fact, comments that criticize, right, not critique, but criticize writing and all that are taken down. Right? Because it's meant to be a safe forum, right? Anybody should be able to write, So some of the content up there, will not necessarily be in good English, grammatically correct English. Some of it would be quite cyclical, could be fragmented, all of those kinds of things, right? But at the same time, right, they still garner a lot of appreciation from people. They respect, the kind of, at least the understanding is that they do respect, right? The posts that are put up and all the writing that is done and all of those kinds of things, right? And also, there is this feeling of, shared community, property, right? So I belong to a particular forum, like a fan forum of a television series. So all the characters in that particular, on that particular series belong to them, right? So they are the common property in that sense of the word. So all of that, enables that particular community to develop a sense of, that particular society to develop a sense of community largely, right? And that is the way in which that segment operates. How much time do I have? So anybody's keeping track of the time? Okay, fine. Then I'll just go on. Right. Anyway, so in terms of this digital society, maybe I'll not look at it because I've already sort of mentioned some of these ideas, so it's sort of repetitive. So, so this is a platform, right? There's a coming together of, let's say social technical, it is a social technical assemblage, right? A digital society with its own distinct culture, norms, intricate governance structures, and all of those kinds of things, right? And what's most important for us to understand is that, how does a platform like this, right, maintain order and cultivate a specific kind of community? What's the hidden logic that governs this digital nation? Right? And it's actually a digital nation. We come to that particular aspect also a little later. Right? And one of the key aspects that Vijay Bhattacharya, the founders of instance on as far as this community is concerned is that people come here, right, to this particular community, to this particular forum for relaxation. This is not any intellectual forum he claims all the time. It is only for entertainment and relaxation, and the goal is to keep it that way. So if people have to be entertained and relaxed in the particular forum, then criticism, dissonance, all of those kinds of things will have to be rooted out. Right? So you can only say the good things here broadly. Right? And that sort of, weirdly creates a safe space for one community, but at the same time it also produces maybe dissent and problems, for another section of people who believe that freedom of expression is important. Right? So that's the central tension, right? Interference operates as a speech machine, which promotes, let's say, free expression, but at the same time, it works as a community keeper, right? Safeguarding fragile communities, right? Restricting a certain kind of, expression, all of those kinds of things, right? And this is the tension that, necessarily almost all platforms operate within, largely, right? So there is a visible layer, right, which comes from, let's say, terms of use, privacy policies, forum rules, guidelines, operational guidelines, all of those kinds of things, right? So within the forum guidelines, you're told to be respectful to others, you're told to stay on topic, you're told to use proper language and grammar, you're told not to spam, you're told to react rather than put a +1 to pose and things like that. Right? You are supposed to report inappropriate content, you're supposed to follow all the rules, and you also have to address moderation privately. So I have an issue with respect to, if by chance I posted something, the moderator feels it is inappropriate, they issue a warning to me and take down the particular post. Now I have a problem with that kind of a moderation. Rather than raising it in a common forum, I have to private message the moderator and tell them that I have an issue with it. But obviously, people don't necessarily do that because they obviously get offended when your posts are taken down and then they have to get into this particular tip with the moderator and things like that. So that kind of behavior is not condoned in that particular platform. So this is a visible layer. Then you have an enforcement layer which is played out by the custodians broadly. So the moderators, right, is the human infrastructure. The development team is the human infrastructure which is responsible for implementing the rules on the particular programs. Right? And it's also interesting, right, in terms of the choice of the development team members. You're chosen on the basis of your maturity in handling issues in the forum, your levels of responsibility, creativity, and the history of mediating disputes. And also, so long as you do not have any prior warnings, then you can become a member of the development team. Right? And one of the development team members tells, claims, right, other development team members with this kind of a quotation broadly, right, which says you must practice the Gandhian principle that if someone slaps you on one cheek, you should offer the other. Everything can be solved with patience and maturity. Now, only if you're trained in this particular this kind of an idea can you become a development team member broadly, right? So that's a way in which this has now this is very interesting. Captain Gillespie is one of those key. He's a media professor and he's somebody who extensively worked on platforms largely, right? And he's the first person who looked at the sociology of platforms, right? The anthropology of platforms and all that. At a particular time, when platform studies were emerging within computer science departments. Now, in computer science departments, platform studies emerged along with software studies, code studies, and things like that, right? Which today we understand as part of the digital humanities and things like that. So, platform studies was also one of those very technical kind of streams, right, that emerged within computer science departments. Now, Tartan Gillespie is a media professor, and he interestingly looked at the idea that the platform is not necessarily simply a technical assemblage, right? It's a social technical assemblage in the sense that there are social relationships within that particular platform that define the way in which that particular platform operates, right? So the way in which fans operate within that particular community as enabled by the platform. So as you would see in this particular process, right, you would know that the India Forums as a particular platform enables you to function in a very specific kind of way in that platform. Right? It allows you certain things and it also disallows you certain things. Now that is an algorithmic kind of a thing and also a rule kind of a thing that is that is embedded into the platform structure in itself. Right, so the affordances of the platform are such that you can only produce work in this particular kind of a manner. Right. So in that sense, it sort of becomes very restrictive. So it is it's like any democracy, right? It's supposed to be for the people, by the people, and of the people. But you know how it works in an indirect democracy English way, right? I don't think any of us have actually sort of put the kind of rulers that we have into power in in a very democratic sense of the word largely, right? But anyway, you get what I'm trying to say, right? That is what and independence in that sense of the word, right? Is like democratic platform, the manner in which democracy operates within the country, right? Very basic in that sense, right? So, but yeah. So that's the way in which it is. So to me, like the operational logic of this particular manual is what I call the local ethical model framework and mechanism, EMFM, as I see it, right? The EMFM is the kind of the structure of the government in itself. So this embodies certain core Western ideals and certain core Indian ideals broadly. Right? It is platonic in the sense that like a belief in metaphysical good for the community. Right? It is Aristotelian in the sense that we believe in eudaimonia, but eudaimonia is the kind of pleasure that comes from doing the right thing. Right? Not pleasure that comes from doing anything that you want, but the kind of pleasure that is advocated as coming from doing the right kind of engagement, the right kind of technology. Right? It is deontological in the sense that it is the duty of the members to follow the rules and regulations of the particular platform, and it is quite utilitarian in the sense that the focus of the platform is engaged with the data mapping. Right? And in a very Indian kind of a way, right? It is dependent on mediation of disputes and being supportive of each other. It is focused on the betterment of the forum without harming others, right? And it also builds on the idea of sacrificing personal good, right, for the greater good of the community and that sort of way. I do think particular aspects, right, very clearly with Indian philosophy and aspects of Gandhi philosophy and all of that. I'm not going to go into details about it for paucity of time, but anyway. So the idea again, right, is a reiteration of the same idea that we talked about earlier also. The platform is meant for entertainment, right, and relaxation. And that is the only thing that the platform should necessarily be doing. Right? This is not a political platform, this is not meant for any kind of proselytizing or any of those kinds of things. Now, this EMFM, that is the ethical model framework and mechanism, it translates into an extensive set of rules and regulations broadly. Now, the idea of this is to sort of create, right, to regulate the content in such a way that intensive for the users of that particular platform. Now, this fan fiction serves as a prime example, right? Fan fiction in general, right, serves as a prime example of this kind of governance. Now, if you take the example of fan fiction here, in this particular forum, any fan fiction should be rated according to these ratings, right? General, so meant for everybody, mature, meant for adult audiences only, restricted and explicit, meant for adult audiences again, but only those adult audiences who would like to watch it. So you will have to sort of, all read it. So you have to give the rating of, let's say, R for, let's say, content that is, not necessarily meant for everybody, right? And X also for explicit content probably. But at other instance, there are also no's for the fan fiction that is produced there. So no pornography without any plot, just for the sake of it, no real person fiction. Now this is something that I sort of mentioned in the earlier instances, right? Because they feel that it is morally problematic to ship people together, right? Gear people together. Characters you may ship, you can create couples of doubt and all those kinds of things, but not real people. Because it could probably, as far as the forum is concerned, impact real relations. Right? So therefore RPF, that is real person fiction, is frowned down in the particular community. No explicit BDSM, no incest engaged, right? No writing that is that talks about incest, no pedophilia, no necrophilia, no bestiality, and no descriptive rape narratives. And in addition to that, it also sort of, has a ban on mythological fan fiction also. To create fan fiction based on mythological stories is also banned because it could possibly offend religious sensibilities. Right? And obviously there is and also very obviously keeping in with the moral boundaries that they have, there is an absolute ban on glorifying incest in these particular platforms. Now, as far as the details evolving of this particular platform is concerned, there are terms of use, privacy policies, all of that, which is considered like standard form contract under Indian law. Now, when we talk about a standard form contract, right, it is one party who will draft all these terms, and the other party can give access or decline with no room for negotiation. Now, all of us are familiar with these standard form contract. All of us, click on these standard form contract almost on a day-to-day basis. All of us are part of WhatsApp groups and Instagram and all of that. WhatsApp, yes. So when you join these particular platforms, you get a, terms of use this thing, and only if you agree to that and click on agree can you proceed further. If you say I disagree, then obviously you cannot become a member of it, right? So you only want me to go in that particular process. If you want to use WhatsApp, you will have to agree. That's the way in which this also India forums also operates. And those are standard form contracts and they are legally viable actually. Right? The consequence of this is that so this steals right all the advantages, right, and protections in favor of the platform. Right? And for legal accountability for all user generated content is placed squarely on the user. So I generate fan fiction, I put up fan fiction on the particular platform. Now there are a number of times, when people, authors, producers have come back and said that, that is plagiarized, right? That is inappropriate content and all of that. So the platform takes no responsibility for the content. It places all that responsibility, copyrights and all of that in the hands of the user. So it will not support the user if anything goes wrong in those particular instances. But at the same time, it has absolute control over the content that the user generates in that particular platform. So it can use the user-generated content for their advertising revenues, for soliciting advertising revenues, all kinds of things, right? But at the same time, they will not take responsibility for any such content that is generated by the user. But they can take privileges of it largely. So that is what we have time emphasizing. All standard form of content is also very basic way. Right? And all of us sort of, happily click on pages without eating any of those. And how to content that goes in the standard form of content is that we, anybody, right, who uses a particular platform, the content that we produce as a particular platform can be utilized by that particular platform in individual manner. Right. So we are usually present on content to there, right? Right? So that's what happens in the particular platform. Now, with this larger kind of schema, you see that there is a very interesting way in which digital synthesis is being created, right, by the given platform probably, right? So there is like a digital synthesis doing, and the platform, right, takes care of each of these aspects. I'm not going to go into details of this because now, to look at the agencies that this particular platform enables to. Right, now within this particular platform, right, people have, right, users have agency, right, to do what they are to be doing largely, right, within this particular platform. So they can write fan fiction, they can create, video mixes, they can do their, they can do community polls, all kinds of things. They can create multimedia content, all of that. So right, you have a lot of activities, and this is the collaborative work that we were talking about largely. Somebody posts a fan fiction, somebody comments on it, puts a like on it, interprets the particular thing, and it becomes, the entire fan fiction becomes a hypertext, a work in progress broadly, right, which is curated and constructed, right, authored by multiple authors. So each of us, right, commenting, liking, interpreting becomes the co-author in that particular schema, right, in that writing process, right? All of us become collaborative authors, right? And that's really with a lot of time work, right, operates within the communities like this. And there are different ways in which this operates. Now there's agencies, collective agencies that can be developed within this particular platforms also. And it is this agency collective action that can take on, let's say, the culture industry or the creative industry broadly. One example is that one of those particular instances when there was a hugely popular television series. And unlike media television series, this is a very short-lived series which aired only around 280 plus episodes. Right, in the bank of, let's say, 5,000, 1,000 plus episodes in order. This was a relatively small series. It was called Kottayam, I'm not very sure if you're familiar with the particular series, but it ran between 2010 and 2012. Now, what happened is that in 2012, in late 2012, it was rumored that the main lead of the particular series, Sophie, was leaving in that particular show. Now what happens is the fans, right, of the particular show banded together, they really calls, right, to the production house as well as the channel staff to say that, they refuse to see the show without Sophie as a lead character. Right, because if you're familiar with Indian television series, you know that, they can remake of actors at any moment, right? And they will let's say the same character from the point the authors, the actors that from the previous day, which is same character, the same clothes, everything, right? It just continues like that. So the IQAC fans, right, they decided they're not going to do things like that, and they did not want to see the series. So they, for the first time in the history of Indian television, largely that show was pulled off air, right? Immediately after Bannerghatta left the show largely. And for the first time, we also had a banner that a ban, beneath the particular show saying that the show is coming to an end because Bannerghatta is leaving the show. Right, and it was fans were unwilling to continue the show without his presence. Right, so that's the kind of engagement, right, the possibilities that are available for fans within the particular fandom largely, and it is individuals that enable that kind of collective action broadly. Right, now India was also right functions as a rogue archive. Now rogue archive is an idea that academically Cosmic talks about, right, in her book rogue archives. So what it largely means, right, is these are digital memory institutions created and maintained by amateur archivists. So none of the fans are largely trained in archiving or anything. They are simply, people who curate, their wishes, their engagements and all that into fan fiction, into video mixes and all that, and produce it or put it up in that particular platform largely. Right, so this platform acts like a massive road market with user-generated fan content, social interaction, cultural scheme of a particular stigmatized community broadly. Like I initially talked about, right, Hindi television serial fans are the white stigmatized, right, in terms of, because very often I say that, okay, I sort of work with Hindi television serials, right, people are like, oh, right, and I'm sure you get where it is from largely, right, because it's not considered to be good intellectual, academic content to engage with broadly, right. But it's also interesting, what fans can do within these kind of platforms. So these rogue archives, right, platforms are democratic, they are built by users and not by institutions. Right, in this instance, India was also technically built by fans, right, for fans, and it is led forward by fans. So in that sense, it is not an institution. It preserves content, right, of fan work, conservation, traditional archives, and network archives. Right, these are unworthy things for a traditional archive, right, which are operational or power and things like that. Right. With sanctions, certain kinds of content universal in the sense that it archives anything and everything belonging to the particular television serial or serial or so. It is living through something in the sense that it is something that it is always in the making, right? And this is a term that a lot of digital humanists use, right, for digital archive, right? In the sense that it is always in the, it's a working process. Because things can be constantly added to it at any point, right? So that is also there. Another important way which agency operates within this particular role, I think that which is also something that a lot of other scholars will look at also in terms of equity or feminism. It's about providing of one's self, one's body, one's experiences broadly, right? In the very sensual idea, right? It's a individual feminine, right? It's the body, right? The writing of the meaning, self-class, and so on. Because most of the fan fiction that is generated on the particular platform is, from the 60% of the videos that, that are members of the particular group. It's also considered the age pick largely because, the Freud age, right? Pick largely because it's something right? Right? It is a work that is built at visual, combination of the lines and all those kinds of things, right? Things that are social and accessible enough platforms and all those kinds of things. Because let's say something actually can come up with something international platforms. Right. So in that sense, right, in the whole archive document, archive document is also specifically a female action creativity, making this is the other form of education for media is large. Because if you look at the community of these particular also, you would see that it's mostly by doing some of them working, some of them not working, and most of them right have stories of other laws and all of those kinds of things also to tell us right in that particular role. They also sort of find solace with each other, they sort of they sort of interact with each other and now, like I said, right, it is democratic, but at the same time, that is what dissonance in particular rules based on the rules and regulations of the rules also. Like there are fiction, right, that comes from side criticism, allegations of bias from side moderators. There is this conflict between the safe space and curation that happens there also, right? So all of those kinds of things. The idea that like a lot of users are pointing out, protecting members from abuse by guiding members is a direct response to the roadmap and spaces and technical celebrity. And the context of this is that what happens in these particular forums is sometimes when a particular user right make derogatory comments or criticizes the celebrity in order that they are forced to stay in them and the members issue the warning and things like that. Now that is quite ultra violence, right? If I can call it that way, right? Of the idea of freedom of speech, let's say. Right. So if you talk about, so then what happens here is that there creates a lot of discontent among people, right? Because technically you're able to say, you should be able to say everything that you want to say, but at the same time, if you say what you want to say, it's also taken down in that sense of the word. But the idea again is that, like, the idea for them is, like Richard Allen said, that it is, right, freedom of expression is good, right, but not at the cost of anybody else's engagement, right, or anybody else's liberty and anything like that. That's the way which the code operates. Now, it's also important to realize why these kinds of things are taken down, if it is celebrity bashing and things like that, because advertising revenues are also dependent, right, on the way in which the forum functions. So the very moment the forum gains a particular name, right, for celebrity bashing, obviously there is a lack of, there will be, advertising that could be affected, or reputation that could be affected, all of those kinds of things, or the entry into, like I told you, right, this is a particular forum, right, where they have set up journalists who go into these particular shooting locations and shoot content for behind the scenes content for the audience. Now those kinds of things will, face restrictions and things like that, right? If you don't know celebrity bashing and things like that. So there are reasons as to why these particular kind of things operate also. Now, so therefore, this is a paradox, right? On one side, there is community and safety, and on the other side, there is control and autocracy, right? So there is promise of freedom of expression, but at the same time, there is an autocratic necessity of moderation. And this aligns, right? I mean, with Vijay Gandhi, he said, it is the choice of the member to be part of the forum by following the rules or not being part of the forum. So if you cannot follow the rules of the forum, you don't have to be part of the forum. But that's the agency you can exercise broadly. So So the trade-off here is that if the system is greater with the greatest number 10 to 90, right? So this means that there will be a minority or more than a minority that will be disprivileged. Right? So these are the kind of expression will be allowed. So this is the way in which the problem with paradox is resolved. Just because I have freedom of speech does not mean that I can say anything and everything. Things could go off because the world do not have a basic set of rules from which to operate, and that's again in the complex position as far as the community is concerned. Right. So the idea is that these walls are like required to protect the privacy and safety of the non-property. Right. It creates a safe space, but at the cost of sort of and intimidation and property. Right. So the fundamental thing is that artificial intelligence and platforms are not platforms without moderation. It is an essential constitutional definitional function of a platform. Right? Because earlier, platforms were not moderated. So what happened would be that there would be hate speech, racism, misinformation, digital abuse, cyberbullying, all of the harassment, even for that matter, and even cyber violence that are connected in unmoderated platforms. So therefore, most platforms deem it necessary to curate a safe space for users, where there is protection, positive community engagement, trust, fairness, and moderation. Right? And that seems to be one of those solutions that most platforms advocate, right? For community systems to be built and to be built and flourishing largely. So this is broadly the idea. Right? This is the kind of goals these are the student generated, right? So it's a necessity, right, that we have rules and regulations. At least that's the way in which I see it also. People might differ, right, depending on how you engage with this and all that. But broadly, I see it that it is necessary that we have certain rules and regulations. Right? It has its own problems, yes, but at the same time, the democracy is without a problem. Right? And in some fashion or the other, we all feel the same idea that it is great to operate an arm of an idea, right? And that's the dominant kind of way in which it operates. So today what we've looked at broadly to sum up this particular idea. First is that structure that hierarchy is both a legal and military agency. That's the first idea that we were talking about, one of those ideas that we were looking at. The second aspect that we were looking at is that gamification incentivizes participation but also shapes behavior. In the third instance, we looked at governance as a tool and enforcement that define the boundaries of agency. Your agency, but at the same time, is defined by different kinds of boundaries. Right? And in the last instance, we're also looking at modes of quantification that offer different levels of agency, right? Depending on your land use and things like that. And finally, this agency enables you to develop a different kind of identity, right? Within the platform, within the particular field. And sometimes these identities are very well cherished by the members of the community because in a lot of instances, there are a lot of these members who talk about the fact that they have no agency outside of the particular space, right? Within their homes, sometimes within their kitchens, within the decision making in the community, in the families, and all those kinds of things, right? So this particular space has become, right, for a lot of people, right? Not everybody, but for a lot of people, a particular space where they can express themselves, have a particular say in certain kinds of engagements, decisions, all those kinds of things. So it does become empowering for a lot of people, but at the same time, it can also be problematic for another set of people also. Right? So that's where it is. Thank you so much. So I'm open to questions if you have any, but I do know it was a long piece of visiting. So I lost some of you in between I had to go, and towards the end I did go a little fast because time was that I could see. Thank you.
Now I request Glenn Davies, Secretary English.
When I was doing my PhD, most of my classmates were a huge fan of COVID. So a lot of them traveled to Kazakh and they wrote about it. Okay, and they appeared in magazines and newspapers. 2 weeks back, when Body was like the award was given, it was given to a non movie. Okay, and that was based on the life of Shakespeare's son and wife. So my question is, that's also a part of fan fiction, right? So what is the difference between that kind of fan fiction and this one? We have a new one to this one, because I'm completely confused. It's a kind of high culture, popular culture, difficult. Action has only virtual presence. So actually, we talked about the India forum, right? There is a factor of money behind it. Okay.
So, ma'am, I have a question. So, I am actually stretching this scenario to the level of social politics, okay? It's not just about literature or entertainment. Literature definitely is inevitably linked to the social political reality, but then let me really set the context of my question. So, the context is the plane crash of 2025. So, usually, whenever a catastrophe happens, the journalists and people connected to the media they rush to the spot and they capture the news and then it's published and people get to know about it. But in this scenario, a 17-year-old boy, he captured the footage. He actually thought that it was about a plane landing, but then it turned out to be a plane actually crashing into a boy's hostel in Bannerghatta. Numerous people died, only one person remarkably or miraculously escaped, fortunately. But then he was made a mythic figure by the so-called fans, the social political reality. There were these journalistic reports and immature preliminary plane crash report was also published. And this report carried numerous aviation jargons and emojis. The public thought that it's real, that it's official, that it's how things were. There were these aviation YouTubers or content creators, even pilots who made use of these AI simulators to see what the alternative reality would have been. So my question is, how pertinent or, excuse me when I ask this, how legal is the concept of fan fiction in the age of deepfakes, disinformation, and AI? It doesn't have any say in reality. Okay.
Thank you so much, Nat, for that insightful and inspiring session. Now, I request Glenn Davies, second year PA English student, for the word of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. It was a pleasure listening to this real particularly in-depth exploration of how fans engage, which truly enriched our understanding. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your insightful lecture on behalf of the English department, and I also thank the participants for their active participation. Thank you.